So good afternoon all. On behalf of Bharat Serums and Vaccines Limited, I would like to welcome you, all the attendees, as well as our today's eminent speaker, Dr. Prashant Deshmukh. Sir, Dr. Prashant Deshmukh is already very well-known doctor in Nasik and always also in all Maharashtra. But it's my duty, it's my pleasure to introduce short introduction, sir. Dr. Prashant Deshmukh is MS gynecologist. He has done his MS from Sion Hospital from Mumbai. He has also completed his fellowship in advanced gynec endoscopy and infertility, Ruby Hall, Pune. Dr. Prashant Deshmukh is a practicing gynecologist and obstetrician, endoscopy, infertility specialist, also laparoscopic surgeon with experience of almost 12 years, same located in Nasik. He is a medical director at Matrutva Women's and Child Care Hospital, Nashik. Dr. Prashant Deshmukh, majorly interested and expert in endoscopy, infertility treatment, IUI, and laparoscopy. He is also co-author of book of MCQ in OBGY, gynec, and fibroids. He has conducted also clinical trials of IV iron sucrose for IDA in pregnancy 2003 and 2007. Also conducted clinical trial on recombinant FSH, that is RFSH versus urinary HMG in IVF treatment in 2009-2010. He has also received prestigious Foxy Corion Award in 2008. He was also participated as a faculty in AICOG 2011, Mumbai. So this is a small introduction of Dr. Prashant Deshmukh. Sir, over to you.
Okay. Hello. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for such a kind introduction. So today we will start our lecture. The topic for today is a little bit different from regular topic. So we are going to discuss role of immunoglobulins in RPL. So most of the times we see many webinars on RPL, which are very commonly discussed and always very commonly discussed topic in many webinars. But today our topic is restricted to only immunoglobulins in RPL, not the whole RPL. So, we'll start our seminar. What is RPL? So first we should know the definition of RPL. What is RPL? RPL is recurrent pregnancy loss. Just a minute. I will just start slideshow. Hey, slideshow. Okay. Just a minute, we have some technical problems here. We'll just start in 2 minutes. Yeah. Start. Take close. Yeah. Yeah. So what is the definition of recurrent pregnancy loss? So as per ASRM, that is American guidelines, any patient who has undergone recurrent abortion at least 2 times or more, they consider as a patient of recurrent pregnancy loss. Whereas by ISHRE guidelines, any patient having 3 or more consecutive miscarriages, we call them as a patient who is suffering from RPL. And the age of viability of the fetus is considered to be less than 22 weeks by WHO criteria and 24 weeks by RCOG criteria. So what is the incidence of RPL in general population or in pregnancy? By ASLM criteria, the incidence of RPL is around 1 to 2%, whereas by ISHRE criteria, where patients have more than 3 consecutive abortions, the incidence is around 0.5 to 1%. And if we consider the incidence as per the age, the best reproductive age for any female is 20 to 24 years of age, where she has very low risk of having abortions, that is only 11%. But as the age progresses, we can see here the risk of abortion or recurrent pregnancy loss that goes almost 2 times the normal in the age of 35 to 40 years. And the risk of miscarriage is almost 4 times to 50% of patient can have pregnancy loss after the age of 40 years. So the risk of pregnancy loss or recurrent abortion is definitely increased with the age of the patient. And if we see the previous obstetric history of the patient, primary gravid patient, as we saw earlier, they have risk of miscarriage of only 11 to 13%. With only previous one loss, the risk of repeat miscarriage is only 14%. But as the patient has previous more and more losses, the risk of miscarriage go up to 77% in a patient who had previous 5 losses. So more the abortion, previous abortion, the risk of abortion in current pregnancy is always higher. So you have to be very cautious and properly evaluate the patient who is coming to you with recurrent abortions. So what are the types of RPL? So there are 2 types of RPL. One is primary RPL, where the patient has no previous history of successful pregnancy. Whereas secondary RPL is a patient where there is a previous one successful pregnancy. After that, she is getting repeated abortions. We can see both the type of patient in our clinical practice day to day. So what are the reasons? What are the causes for recurrent pregnancy losses? So if we see this chart, the almost in 50% of the patient, we can definitely find out the cause of RPL. And the most common causes being genetic factor. Genetic factor generally contribute to 5% of the recurrent pregnancy loss. The genetic problem can be from maternal side, paternal side, or in the embryo itself. That is parental and fetal causes of genetic abnormality. 15% cases, almost 12 to 16% cases, they are contributed by anatomical abnormality, like Mullerian anomalies in the patient, fibroids, polyps, Asherman syndrome, or cervical incompetency. So the anatomical factor contribute for 12 to 16% cases. Endocrine factor, the most common being PCO nowadays we see very commonly, luteal phase defect, premature ovarian failure, thyroid dysfunction, and uncontrolled diabetes mellitus. So they also contribute almost 20% of the patient with recurrent pregnancy loss. Then inherited thrombophilias and acquired thrombophilia, like antiphospholipid antibody syndrome and inherited thrombophilia, they also contribute 10 to 20% of patient of RPL. And infections, the role of infection is still questionable, but still there are some studies which show the chlamydial infection, tuberculosis, they may cause infection in few patients, but still the role of infection not yet clear. So most of the patient, if you investigate for the cause of RPL, generally 50% of the patient, we find one or more of the above causes like genetic factor, anatomical, endocrinological, infection, and thrombophilias. But if we see in the right corner, there's something called as unexplained recurrent pregnancy loss, which contributes to almost 50% of the patients which come to the OPD. So in 50% of the patient, we are not able to find out the exact cause of miscarriage, where nowadays a new concept is coming up, the concept of alloimmunity. So what is alloimmunity? So we are going to discuss this in detail in our subsequent part. So first, I just want to highlight one part of the RPL, that is antiphospholipid antibody syndrome. Actually, it is not our topic of discussion today, but still, as we are discussing immunoglobulins, so I would definitely like to mention antiphospholipid APS, antiphospholipid syndrome, because immunoglobulins, they also work in this category of abortions also. And the most important role of immunoglobulin in unexplained infertility, where you cannot find any cause. And in those patients, we commonly find it is alloimmunity, the mother's immune system, which works against the fetus and cause fertilization repeatedly, where we can suppress mother's immunity by using active and passive immunization, the passive immunization being immunoglobulins. So immunological factor, if we consider in RPL, they are autoimmune factor and autoimmune factor. In autoimmunity, we see Apla syndrome and SLE, which are very common causes of immunological rejection of pregnancy. Whereas in alloimmune rejection, which is a very new concept, and that we are going to discuss today, where many times the physician label it as unexplained repeated losses or unexplained infertility. The patient is not able to conceive or gets repeated abortion, and all reports of the patients are normal after thorough investigation. Then we are now in a doom. What to do next? And here is the concept of alloimmunization, which comes into play, and role of immunoglobulins, which prevent abortions and infertility, recurrent pregnancy losses, and recurrent implantation failure in a patient of unexplained RPL and RIF. So anti-phospholipid antibody syndrome, which is again, which contribute around 15 to 20% patients of the RPL. So what is APLA? So these are the heterogeneous family of autoantibodies that binds to the negatively charged phospholipids and phospholipid binding proteins and a combination. Almost more than 20 anti-phospholipid antibodies have been described so far. So how does they function? The mechanism of action of APLA is, these are the antibody which specifically react with the phospholipids on the surface of the cells. They interfere with the intrinsic and the extrinsic coagulative pathway, thereby promoting excessive clotting inside the body, mainly in the placental vasculature, leading to the placental thrombosis and recurrent pregnancy losses. It also binds to the beta-2 glycoprotein 1, which is in vivo anticoagulant, thereby causing excessive in vivo coagulation, placental thrombosis. These antibodies also bind to the phospholipids on the trophoblast, thereby inhibiting the successful implantation of the embryo in the endometrium. And they also interact with the platelets in the placenta, thereby decreasing the placental perfusion. So if you see this slide, and if you want to summarize it, anti-phospholipid antibodies bind to the phospholipids of various components in the uterus, placenta, platelets, and trophoblast, causing excessive coagulation. It decreases blood supply to the fetus and causes sudden loss in the pregnancy. So how do you diagnose the APLA syndrome, the patient with APLA syndrome? So patient should fulfill at least one clinical and one laboratory criteria to be labeled as APLA syndrome. In clinical criteria, either there should be the history of vascular thrombosis, arterial or venous, which was confirmed by imaging, Doppler or histopathology. And if you see the pregnancy-related morbidity, there should be the history of at least more than 3 consecutive spontaneous losses, which are less than 10 weeks, and all the other causes of losses are excluded. Or there should be at least more than 1 unexplained death of the morphologically normal fetus after 10 weeks, and more than 1 preterm birth less than 34 weeks of gestation because of severe preeclampsia or placental insufficiency. And if you see the laboratory criteria, we should be able to diagnose on 2 separate occasions, 12 weeks apart, a presence of lupus anticoagulant in patient serum or anticardiolipin antibodies, IgG and IgM, both in moderate to high titer on 2 separate occasions, 12 weeks apart in the same patient. If we get this clinical and laboratory criteria, then we can label patient as a case of APLA syndrome. So then what is the treatment for APLA syndrome? The basic pathology for the APLA syndrome is intravascular or more of placental thrombosis and placental infarction. So the role of anticoagulants, mainly low dose aspirin and LMWH, low molecular heparin, is very, very important. And it is proven that LDA, low dose aspirin and low dose heparin, they work beautifully in cases of recurrent pregnancy loss because of APS. And almost the live birth rate of 80% is achieved after using antithrombotic treatment with low dose aspirin and low molecular heparin. And if you don't do any intervention, almost 10% of the patient will have a live birth rate. 90% of the patient who are not treated with anticoagulant and having APS should abort in their first or second trimester. So as per the ISHRE guidelines, any woman who fulfills the laboratory criteria of APS and a history of 3 or more consecutive losses, they suggest administration of low dose aspirin, that is 75 to 100 milligram per day, starting before the conception, and prophylactic dose of low molecular heparin starting at the date of positive pregnancy test. And they have found almost 80% live birth rate in a patient of APS if you use this protocol. But nowadays, even if we see a lot of patients who come to us with losses, even if they have taken heparin in the pregnancy, they have taken low dose aspirin in the pregnancy, but still they get pregnancy loss in first or second trimester. So I think here comes the role of immunomodulator. So as a immunomodulator, heparin, so newer studies which are done in 2017, which clearly show heparin is not only work as an anticoagulant, but it also decreases the miscarriage rate and it improves the live birth rate in cases of unexplained RPL, where the APLA antibodies are negative. So heparin prevent abortion in case of APLA as well as non-APLA also, and it is a very good immunomodulator in pregnancy. So how does heparin function as an immunomodulator? So many studies show the role of heparin as an immunomodulator in the absence of autoimmune implantation failure is debatable. But if we see, heparin is normally produced in the liver and it is present in the endometrium at the time of implantation. And it functions as an immunomodulator by blocking L-selectin receptors on blastocysts. It also alters the integrin expression by the deciduea, and it increases the expression of interleukin-1 and GCSF. These are the favorable cytokines which favor implantation in the early weeks of pregnancy. So by doing all these things, heparin will also function as an antithrombotic as well as immunomodulator and favor pregnancy in case of APLA syndrome. Many patients with APLA syndrome, they are associated with anti-nuclear antibodies also, that we call as SLE. So SLE patient also shows increased prevalence of RPL. And what is the treatment of the patient if the patient has a ANA positive or dsDNA positive, the patient has SLE along with APLA syndrome? So studies now shows that the role of prednisolone, that is steroids, and IV immunoglobulins, they also work better in patient of APLA who are also having SLE. So this is called secondary APLA syndrome. The primary APLA syndrome, where the patient do not have any other associated mixed tissue or connective disorder like SLE, the primary APLA patient, they generally benefit from the anticoagulants like aspirin and heparin. But if the patient has secondary APLA syndrome, that is APLA syndrome associated with other connective tissue disorder like SLE, they definitely benefit by giving steroids like prednisolone and IV immunoglobulin. But studies clearly show that the IV immunoglobulin are superior to the prednisolone with regard to the live birth rate, number of miscarriages, and preterm delivery as compared to steroids. So what is the role of immunomodulator in cases of APLA syndrome? Have anybody used immunoglobulin in such patients? So I don't know. Even though there are no RCTs which are showing clear-cut benefit of immunoglobulin in APLA syndrome, the present consensus is that the patient generally benefit from the anticoagulants like ADA, low-dose aspirin, and heparin. But many physicians are nowadays using immunoglobulins, intramuscular immunoglobulin, for cases of APLA syndrome. These passive immunoglobulins suppress the cytokine production and the vasculitis, which is produced by the APLA antibodies, and prevent thrombosis, and found to be very useful in patients with APLA syndrome. So from my side, I will have definitely suggest, if you have patient with APLA syndrome, you are giving them low dose aspirin and heparin, but just adding a immunoglobulin along with low dose aspirin and heparin will definitely help the patient, because many patients come to us who have already taken aspirin, heparin, and still they have a loss. So in such patient, immunomodulators, especially immunoglobulins, they have found to be very effective, and many studies are coming up after 2016 which show clear-cut benefit of immunoglobulin or immunoglobulins in unexplained losses or in Apla's syndrome also. Now, actually, today's our discussion was not about the Apla's syndrome. So today's our topic was immunoglobulins in RPL, and immunoglobulins are mainly useful in patients of unexplained RPL. Most of the patient we find the cause. So when do you call any patient to have unexplained losses? Then you have to rule out the common causes like genetic problem, endocrinological problem by doing TSH, TPO antibodies. You do genetic analysis of the parents. You do APLA screening. You rule out uterine anomalies by 3D sonography, HSG and all. And once you rule out all main causes, if they all are normal, then we call patient as a case of unexplained infertility, and the incidence of patient having unexplained infertility or recurrent pregnancy loss around almost 50%. Only 50% of patient will have proper cause like genetic, immunological, endocrinological, or anatomical abnormality. But the 50% patient will not have any abnormality in their reports, but still they have repeated losses, which are called unexplained RPL. And how they happen, how does mother's immunity work in this patient, and what is the exact mechanism of abortion in the patient of unexplained RPL, that we are going to discuss now, henceforth. Now, the further slides are very important for us. So, how does a normal immune system of a mother function? The function of immune system is categorized in two parts. The first function is recognition of the antigen, whether the antigen is self-antigen or non-self antigen. And then the response of the immune system in the form of destruction of the non-self antigen like infectious agent or dysregulated self antigen that we see in case of cancers. And the response of immune system can also be the tolerance to the self-allo antigen or pregnancy. So the immune tolerance is the most important mechanism for the successful pregnancy of the patient. And if there is a lack of immune tolerance or failure of immune tolerance by the mother, the patient will bound to have repeated abortion in such patient. So what is fetus? Fetus is a semigraft which expresses foreign antigen which are derived from different maternal and paternal chromosomes. So 50% of the MHC genes of the fetus, they are generally derived from the non-identical father. So ideally, mother's immune system should always reject fetus, and none of the women on the planet should have a successful pregnancy. So how come your immune system works in favor of pregnancy and we get a successful pregnancy? So what is the normal immune response of the pregnancy? So actually maternal lymphocytes, they are not ignorant of the embryo or the foreign antigen present in the embryo, but instead they are actively primed to recognize the conception antigen, which is leading to the immunological tolerance. And the T regulatory cells, they play a very important role in mediating immune tolerance. So pregnancy, mother's body have an immune tolerance for the foreign antigen which is expressed by the fetus, and mother immune system function in favor of fetus by developing immune tolerance, which is generally done by T regulatory cells. So what are the T regulatory cells? What are T lymphocytes? How do they function? So let's discuss it about in short. So the immune system generally, especially the T cell and the B cell. B cell generally produce antibodies, and T cell are the cell-mediated immunity. They are of two types. T cell are CD8 cell, they are cytotoxic cell, which destroy the foreign agent entering the body like bacteria, viruses. So they are defense mechanism. Whereas the CD4 cell, they are called T helper cell, which are most important for the pregnancy tolerance. So CD4 cells are again divided into four types. T helper cell, that T helper 1, T helper 2, T helper 17, and T regulatory cells. And the T regulatory cells are the basic cell which will give you the immune tolerance in pregnancy to favor the implantation of the fetus and to have a successful pregnancy. So Th1 cell or T helper 1 cell, they produce pro-inflammatory cytokines and destroy the foreign agent in the body. Th2 cell or T helper 2 cells, they are anti-inflammatory cytokines. They produce anti-inflammatory cytokines and B cell division. They are T1 cell and T2 cell are irreversible. Once they are formed in the body, they are not going to be converted to T1 or T2 or T2 to T1. Once they are formed, they are permanent in the body and they will function as an immunosuppressive or immunofavoring. So either they will be pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. But last two types, Th17 and T regulatory cells, they are very important as far as the immune system is concerned in pregnancy. The Th17, the T helper 17 cells are the pro-inflammatory cells, which generally affect pathogens, and they also cause graft rejection because the graft contain many foreign bodies, and the graft is generally mediated by the Th17 cells. And T regulatory cells, they are anti-inflammatory cells or immunosuppressive cells. They are produced in thymus. They are called natural regulatory cells, and they are also produced in deciduea, and they are called inducible T cells. So T17 cells can be induced to the T regulatory cell in deciduea, and they are responsible for the immune tolerance of the pregnancy. So for us, most important are T helper 17 and T regulatory cell, which are interconvertible. The Th1 cell and Th2 are irreversible. Once they are formed, they will their function of pro-inflammation or anti-inflammation permanently. But Th17 cell can be converted to two regulatory cells, and Treg cell can be converted to T17 cell under favorable circumstances, like hormonal production in the pregnancy will switch the gear from T17 cell to T regulatory cells, and many of the immunomodulator in the pregnancy also switch gear from T17 to Treg cell, thereby causing immune tolerance to the pregnancy. It has a local immunosuppressive effect and thereby favoring pregnancy and its implantation in the uterus successfully. Now this slide is also very important, which shows how does a mother's body protect pregnancy, or how there is a mechanism of allorecognition. Fetus being a foreign body containing 50% antigen which are not present in the mother, which are given by father. So how does mother body do allorecognition and work in favor of pregnancy? So in the deciduea and peripheral blood during pregnancy, under the effect of pregnancy hormones, there is conversion of Th17 cell, that is immune cells or pro-inflammatory cells, into anti-inflammatory or suppressive cells like T regulatory cells. These T regulatory cells, which are present in the deciduea, they produce cytokines like interleukin 4, 10, and 13, which are anti-inflammatory cytokines, thus causing facilitation reaction, and they will produce lot of blocking antibodies, which will prevent mother's antibodies, which are going to destroy fetal antigens. So in the deciduea, we get T regulatory cells in the pregnancy, favoring the pregnancy and implantation by producing blocking antibodies. And also the trophoblast cell from the fetus, they also produce HCG, which produces progesterone in good quantity. Progesterone is a very good immunosuppressor. It produces progesterone-induced binding factor, and it will also produce the immune suppression under the influence of Treg cell in the deciduea during the period of implantation. So the trophoblast producing high level of progesterone, and decidual switch of T17 to Treg cell will produce blocking antibodies. The overall environment in the deciduea during the time of implantation is of immunosuppression. There's a lot of production of immunosuppression and blocking antibodies, which will protect the pregnancy and the fetus from rejection. Whereas exactly opposite thing happens when there is a fetal rejection or embryo rejection, or there is a miscarriage or implantation failure. When there is a failure of allorecognition, the deciduea and blood, the response switch from Treg cell to Th17 cells, which are pro-inflammatory cells. They will produce pro-inflammatory immunomarkers like TNF alpha, interleukin 2, and interferon gamma. These cytokines will cause rejection reaction and will act against the production of blocking antibodies. So these inflammatory markers will inhibit the production of blocking antibodies and thereby causing destruction of the pregnancy and the fetus, leading to the miscarriages. Whereas at the same time, if there is a failure of allorecognition, the trophoblast cells also produce less quantity of HCG and progesterone, thereby decreasing the level of progesterone-induced binding factor, leading to the lower immune suppression and destruction of the fetus. So in a successful pregnancy, we get local immunosuppression, which is done by the Treg cell. And in case of failure of allo recognition, like in case of abortion, we get Th17 response, which is an inflammatory response and leading to the destruction of the fetus. And this Th17 and Treg cells are interconvertible under the influence of pregnancy hormones and immunomodulator. So here comes the role of immunomodulator, like immunoglobulins, and there's so many immunomodulators we use in pregnancy, like low molecular heparin, aspirin. They will switch this balance from Th17 cell to Treg cell in the deciduea. These Treg cells are anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressive, and thereby causing the local immunosuppression in the uterus at the time of implantation. Therefore, the mother's immunity does not act against the baby and favors implantation and avoid recurrent abortion. So what are immunomodulators? So now our topic of discussion today is immunomodulator or immunoglobulins. So immunomodulator are defined as the substances which are biological or synthetic, which can suppress, stimulate, or modulate any component of the immune system, including adaptive and innate arm of the immune system. So what are the objectives of immunomodulation in pregnancy? So our main objective of immunomodulation in pregnancy is to induce effective and protective immune response for the pregnancy. The mother should function in favor of pregnancy, in favor of fetus, avoiding rejection, and produce local immunosuppression. But at the same time, it should maintain a normal immune surveillance throughout the body. So there should be a local immunosuppression in the uterus and normal immune response in the body against the foreign pathogens. And it also should overcome the immune suppression effect of the stress and environmental pollution. So what are the properties of ideal immunomodulator? The ideal immunomodulator should have a short half-life. It should stimulate both specific and non-specific immune response. It should be active through oral route. And most importantly, it should be compatible with other drugs, because in pregnancy, we not only give immunomodulators, but we give a lot of other drugs, iron, calcium, low dose aspirin, heparin. So it should be compatible with all other drugs. It should have well-defined chemical composition and biological activity. And the most importantly, it should be inexpensive, because most of the immunomodulators are very expensive. So an ideal immunomodulator, they should not be toxic, antigenic, pyrogenic, and it should not cross placenta and affect baby. At the same time, it should not have any long-term side effect on mother's body also. So what are the options then we have as an immunomodulator in pregnancy? So immunomodulator in pregnancy are either chemicals, they are cytokines, or immunization. So chemicals like HCQ, zinc, vitamin D, vitamin C, they are commonly used in pregnancy as an immunomodulator. Recombinant cytokines like interferons, interleukins, and CSF are also used as an immunomodulator during pregnancy. But most importantly, and the proven benefit of the immunization or immunomodulation in pregnancy is active immunization and passive immunization. The active immunization is LIT, lymphocyte immunization therapy, which is where your lymphocytes are stimulated with the antigen. And passive immunization is immunoglobulins, which are preformed antibodies that we use to suppress the mother's immunity in the uterus, thereby favoring the implantation. So these are the different modalities of immunosuppression or immunomodulation we use in pregnancy, like LITs, lymphocyte immunotherapy, IV immunoglobulin and IM immunoglobulins, steroids, progesterones, intralipids, LMW, heparin, low dose aspirin, and CSF. And very rarely we use growth hormone, L-arginine. Endometrial scratching nowadays very commonly practiced as an immunotherapy for recurrent implantation failure or recurrent pregnancy losses. Endometrial flushing with HCG or G-CSF and anti-TNF alpha medication can be used as immunomodulator. So today's our topic of discussion is immunoglobulins. When we use this immunomodulator in pregnancy, first, what are the criteria that patients should fulfill before starting the immunomodulators like immunoglobulins or heparin or LIT? So we should rule out, as we discussed prior, all the known causes of abortion like anatomical factor, endocrinological factors, genetic factor, thrombophilias, everything should be ruled out. When all reports are normal, then we call patient as a case of unexplained recurrent loss. And in that cases, the cause is alloimmunization, where mother's immunity acts against baby and reject the fetus. And the use of immunomodulator and immunosuppressant is found to be the key role in such cases. So before starting this immunomodulation, we should do a lymphocyte cross-match test, serum TNF alpha level, peripheral blood NK cell, and endometrial LK cell, that is CD57, are very important tests. So if all the reports, all the tests of the RPL are normal, if you do all the tests, everything is normal, then we call it unexplained or immunological losses. In immunological losses, we do lymphocyte cross-match test, TNF alpha level, and peripheral NK cell test. The most commonly and easily able tests are TNF alpha level and peripheral blood NK cell level. These tests are very easily available with us in Metropolis or SRL lab. We can do it. And if they are positive, which shows that there are high level of pro-inflammatory cytokines in the body, which will cause repeated fetal losses or rejection of the fetus in every pregnancy. These are the patients which are there for immunomodulation or immunoglobulin therapy. So immunoglobulin can be given by IV route or IM route. The most commonly, so far we were using IV immunoglobulins. These are the sterilized human globulin. These are the human immunoglobulins which are prepared from the sterilized human plasma of thousands of donors. It contains more than 95% of IgGs, less than 2.5% of the IgA, and very traces of IgM. How does this immunoglobulin function? How do they suppress the local immunity in the uterus and deciduea and favor pregnancy? The mechanism of action is they modulate immune system, they block the macrophages C receptor, thereby production of the inflammatory mediators, cytokines and chemokines is reduced in the local decidua, and it will also suppress the idiopathic antibodies by passive suppression. So it will suppress the antibody-mediated immunity as well as cell-mediated immunity locally in the uterus and decidua, and favoring the favorable environment for the implantation of the embryo in the decidua. So what is the dose of IV immunoglobulin? So actually I have not used it so far, because since last almost 5 to 6 years we are using IM immunoglobulins, so, and IV immunoglobulin very costly, so not very commonly used. But just for the information, the dose of IV immunoglobulin is 500 mg per kg, normally prior to the ET in case of recurrent implantation failure. And once the UPT is positive, you can give 500 mg per kg per month till 28 weeks. And it is found to be very effective in preventing recurrent abortion, especially in a patient who has got increased natural killer cell activity. The live birth rate in case of recurrent miscarriage is found to be 95%, whereas live birth in case of recurrent implantation failure, that in case of IVF, it's found to be 75%, which is only 5% in control group. So it is definitely a very useful therapy, but the problem is the lot of side effects, and the most important being the cost. The one dose of immunoglobulin costs you around 10,000 rupees. So it is a very costly treatment, and it causes a lot of thrombosis. As it is derived from the human plasma, the risk of transmission of infections and the risk which is inherited with the blood transfusion, like headache, fatigue, nausea, vomiting, chills, diarrhea, and joint swelling is there. So there has been many side effects, and cost factor has been the major issue in use of the IV immunoglobulins, and it is contraindicated in a patient who was allergic to it, or in a patient with a renal dysfunction, and a patient with IgA deficiency, because it will cause passive suppression of internal production of immunoglobulins. So any patient who is having IgA deficiency should not be given intravenous immunoglobulin. So what is the option then? Immunoglobulins are so effective, they are doing so much of good work, but the cost is so much, there are so many side effects. Then what option we can have as an immunomodulator or immunoglobulin other than IV immunoglobulin? So nowadays, since last few years, we are using a lot of intramuscular immunoglobulins, and they are also showing equally good result as compared to IV immunoglobulin. And they are mainly used in a patient of recurrent miscarriages or recurrent implant failure, which have inflammatory Th1 response as an underlying cause. That means the Th1, there is a pro-inflammatory response in the uterus locally. The level of pro-cytokines or cytokines causing inflammation, like Th1 cells, they produce cytokines like interferons, TNF alpha, and they will produce lot of rejection of the embryo locally in the decidua. So in such patient, this immunoglobulin work very beautifully. They form, if you give IM immunoglobulin, they form complexes with the Fc receptor or dendritic cell in the skin, which will present antigen to the T lymphocyte and will switch the immune balance from Th17 cell to Treg cell, as we have seen previously. There will be the active induction of T17 cell, that is a pro-inflammatory cell, to anti-inflammatory, that is Treg cell, leading to the local immunosuppression in the uterus and favoring implantation. It also binds to the receptor on the T cell, thereby inducing suppression of the T cell, reducing the TNF alpha level, which is a cytokine commonly involved in the repeated miscarriages. So what is the preparation which is commonly used for the IM use? So generally we use Bharglo, which is a preparation IM immunoglobulin which are used for the patient of recurrent pregnancy losses. It is human normal immunoglobulin preparation. It is used as a 16.5% solution for IM injection. It is available as 2 ml vial. So it contains around 330 milligram of immunoglobulins. If you give it IM intramuscularly, its maximum level are attained within 48 hours, and the remain level sustained for almost 23 days. So the most important advantage of intramuscular immunoglobulin is 3 weekly dosing. We need not give it daily, weekly, almost it is 3 weekly. So it is very convenient for the patient also. It does not interfere with the normal immune response of the body. And it has got very minimal risk of anaphylaxis, which is seen in case of IV immunoglobulin. So we use these intramuscular immunoglobulins in pregnancy as a passive immunotherapy, especially in a patient of recurrent implantation failure or recurrent pregnancy, recurrent miscarriages, to avoid repeated pregnancy losses. But there has been no proper RCTs or proven evidence to suggest this regular therapy for all the patients, because the studies or the randomized controlled trials which are still being conducted in so many areas in the world, but the results are yet to be waited. Up to 2016, most of the studies were showing that there is no use of LIT, that is lymphocyte immunization therapy, active immunization or passive immunization with immunoglobulins in patients with recurrent pregnancy loss or recurrent implantation failure. But nowadays, in last 4 years, from 2016 onwards, many studies are coming up, which are clearly showing the benefit of using immunomodulation in the form of active immunization like LIT, lymphocyte immunization therapy, and immunoglobulin in a patient of recurrent pregnancy losses and recurrent implantation failure in IVF. But what is the future of this then? Immunomodulation. So we need more and more diagnostic tests to select the subgroup of the patient who will benefit from immunomodulation. Nowadays, we have got 4 tests which are available that I've just shown you: the lymphocyte cross match, the commonly always TNF alpha level, and peripheral blood NK cells. If you do those tests and they are positive, then we can definitely use immunoglobulin in such patients. But the common treatment protocol should be agreed upon, because many patients or many physicians, they give this immunoglobulin in different manner. Some are using 3 weekly, some are using weekly, even some are using 2 weekly, some are using twice a week. A common treatment protocol should be agreed upon, and then proper, well-designed, randomized controlled trials should be conducted to see the effectivity. And more research is required to find the mechanism of action of LIT, that is lymphocyte immunization therapy, at the molecular level, so as to replace lymphocyte with appropriate chemicals. And today we have not discussed anything about LIT. Actually, any patient who's having immunological failure of pregnancy or unexplained failure of pregnancy, unexplained infertility, unexplained pregnancy losses, the best treatment protocol is active immunization with lymphocytes, followed by passive immunization with immunoglobulins throughout the pregnancy. So the take-home message is, you should rule out all the known causes of recurrent miscarriages, or recurrent implantation failure, like anatomical problems, endocrine problems, thrombophilias, genetic abnormality, everything should be ruled out. Just don't go and jump onto immunoglobulins every time. So patient should be ruled out of all common causes of recurrent failure. If all the reports are negative, then you should consider alloimmune rejection in such patient as a cause of recurrent failure. Then to confirm the alloimmune rejection, we should do immunological test that I have just discussed with you, like TNF alpha levels, natural killer cell activity, lymphocyte cross match, and endometrial natural killer cell activity. And if any of the test comes positive, that clearly indicates that there is an alloimmune rejection of the pregnancy every time. Mother's immunity is not favoring pregnancy. There is high level of pro-inflammatory markers in the uterus, which should be suppressed with immunomodulation. And then we give immunomodulation treatment, first with active immunization with LIT, that is lymphocyte immune treatment. Once we give lymphocytes, then patient should plan pregnancy within 1 year of LIT and after 4 to 6 weeks LIT. So once we give active lymphocytes, then patient should wait for at least 4 to 6 weeks, and then they should plan pregnancy within 1 year. Once patient conceive, we should use passive immunomodulation with immunoglobulins like Bharglob throughout the pregnancy, especially up to 36 weeks. But still, more and more RCTs are required to confirm the results of immunomodulation in pregnancy. It is still a topic of research, but the recent studies after 2016 are showing very promising results of immunomodulation in pregnancy, especially in a patient of unexplained infertility, unexplained pregnancy losses. And immunomodulation should be used in all such patients where the other causes are ruled out. And my personal experience with immunoglobulins is very fine. We are using a lot of immunoglobulins in the patient with RPL. Already patient comes to us after 3 or 4 miscarriages. They've already taken a lot of anticoagulants, aspirin, heparin, and still they have a failure of pregnancy. And when we start immunoglobulins in such patients, we are getting very good result, and we are avoiding a lot of abortions, because in such cases, mother's immune system is the basic problem, which is working against the implantation or against the fetus and considering fetus as a foreign body. So mother immune body should develop a tolerance for the fetus and should work in favor of the fetus and allow implantation. And this is done by immunomodulation and immunoglobulins. So the take-home message is the best results are seen with the physician who are well informed and combine their own clinical experience with updated scientific evidence, that is RCT. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. For such a nice elaboration on something new and interesting topic.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Actually, I am using immunoglobulins for so many years, but actually how immunity works and how it functions in pregnancy. So because of this webinar, I just went deep in this matter, and I just searched a lot of material, and then I found it was actually interesting and authentic. How does mother's immune system function in pregnancy? How it functions normally? How does immunomodulation and tolerance done in pregnancy? And that's how there is a proper scientific role of immunomodulation in pregnancy can be definitely justified by studying this immune rejection in pregnancy by immune mechanism. So many patients that we leave by telling them that it is unexplained infertility and कुछ नहीं होगा, अगली बार हो जाएगी pregnancy, सब report normal है. No, you should not do this. We have to rule out alloimmune causes. We have to do immunological test, and such patients should be offered immunoglobulins and immunomodulation during pregnancy and sometime even before pregnancy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. As I know, you have seen many of the patients of recurrent implantation failure or RPL patient, and because of its huge experience, you have explained, sir, very well that is the role of immunomodulation or role of immunoglobulin in RPL and RIF. So thanks a lot for nice discussion, most informative discussion. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So today we have many attendees, many doctors from Nashik also. So I'm just requesting to all the attendees, if you have any question, any query you want to ask to Dr. Prashant, please unmute and you can ask.
Yeah, I have a question from Dr. Richa Kulkarni. She's asking me, should we use injection Baglok till full term, oblique 26 days, or like aspirin only till 32 weeks? Yes, Dr. Richa, generally the passive immunization with immunoglobulins or Baglok, the consensus is that we should start immunoglobulin actually once the patient's UPT is positive, and it should be continued till at least 36 weeks of pregnancy. Previously, the studies were telling us that immunoglobulin should be used only till 20 weeks of pregnancy, as there is secondary placentation, which is generally completed by 20 weeks, secondary invasion of trophoblast. So, if we give immunoglobulin till 20 weeks, where we complete the secondary placentation, we can stop immunoglobulins. But nowadays, studies have shown that if we take or if we give immunoglobulin from the beginning of pregnancy till 36 weeks, the late complications like early preeclampsia, IUGR, oligohydramnios, and sometimes sudden abruptio placentae, these all complications can be prevented if we start immunoglobulin in early pregnancy and we continue it till 36 weeks.
Richa ma'am, you can unmute and if you want to ask.
Yeah.
Okay, got message.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we have Dr. Bharti Pawar ma'am also. Ma'am, if you want to ask anything, please unmute. Dr. Nidhi Bhansali ma'am also. Dr. Sopan Tuse, Dr. Ganesh Naikwadi.
Okay.
Yes. Earlier we have Dr. Chandan Gupta also. Dr. Sonal ma'am.
Hi, Chandan.
I think he is now disconnected, or I want to see.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I think.
So I think we have explained the regular immune mechanism in pregnancy and how does it function,
Yeah.
which was the main problem for many physicians. They don't know how exactly the immunoglobulin work. But this slide, I think, will explain everybody how immunoglobulin work in pregnancy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Now almost 1 hour completed, sir. So because
Yes,
of
yes.
time constraint, we'll go to our next agenda. Today we have our Vice President also, Mr. Chanda Venkatraman. So over to you, sir.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Good evening, Dr. Prashant Deshmukh and
Good
all
evening,
the
sir.
attendees. And sir, it was, I would say that fantastic presentation. I
Thank
think
you.
I have attended many of the RPL, this kind of a talk, and your insights and understanding, in-depth understanding of the immunomodulators and immunoglobulins, how it helps. It was a learning session for me as well, sir.
Thank you.
Phenomenal. I think your clinical acumen is equally good. I think your ability to combine academic theory with practice, clinical practice is something phenomenal. You have a great blend.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's great, sir. I'm really raring to meet you at Nashik.
Sure, sure. Me too.
Fine, sir. Sir, and many thanks for accepting this invitation, for coming and speaking on the dais, for helping more women to beget more babies who are having issues with fertility. Rather, I would say that way. Incidentally, we have immunoglobulin called Barglo. Fine, that is incidental. Fine, but ultimately it should improve the lives of pregnant women. Fine, that's the whole idea behind it, sir. Fine.
Yes.
And many thanks for all those attendees who have been very patient and spared some time for coming and listening to the session. Sir, today I will take just 2 minutes of a time for sharing something very interesting. I think before that, Shriram, would you mind sharing that video on BSV with you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and please increase audio. I think my colleague Sriram is going to share a video which has got nothing to do with the product. It is something to do with the Knowledge Hub portal called BSV with you. So this is a portal which provides access to multiple academic access, right from e-journals to eCME articles, published articles, latest index journals, recordings of the most of the seminars, webinars, You name it, you will have it. Kiosk, you can publish article, you can publish your work there. For example, there is a live chat box which will help you to navigate, and it is segmented into different sub segments like fertility, endoscopic surgery, obstetrics, or even fetal medicine. So something very interesting. Yeah, over to you, Sriram. You can run it through.
Yes.
Just couple of minutes.
Playing the
You will not listen to the audio issues there, but that is not needed. Sriram, you can stop sharing it. Um, and sir, I will just give a small brief about this. I'm also sharing a screen. Possibly this will help in understanding what kind of content is there in this portal, for example. Fine. I think it's visible, right, sir? All of you, it must be visible. Fine.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of a content what you will have with BSV with you. You have Congress reports, ISHRE, naked. It may be the latest one will be further updated. Infographics, flashcards, news, webinars, all the latest webinars. You will have many of those top COGI recordings as well. Fine. And international speakers recordings as well. Video vault on specific topics, clinical case-based quiz, clinical guideline, article summary, expert dialogue, patient case simulations, not one, multiple patient case simulations, and the journal. These are all the journal. These are all list of journals which is there uploaded or onto the BSV with you services. Fine, and you see this multiple. Most of it you will have access. Fine. In case you don't have access to some of the journals, you can write it on the chat box. Most likely we'll be in a position to get you. Fine. So this is the kind of a content what you will all have access, will have option for access. For this to happen, we request you to register. My colleagues there, team will there share the link bsvwithyou.com. If some of you is already registered, please visit it and derive maximum benefit. Who have not registered, please register it. It's very simple. It is a user word, password enabled. It will ask you to activate through your email ID and enjoy this access as much as possible. It's purely an academic initiative and endeavor on the part of BSV with you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Sir,
sir.
over to you. What do you think, sir? This is a good service what BSV has for the fellow consultants and academicians like you and gynecs like you, sir?
Hello. Hello, Dr. Prashant.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. Sir,
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 do you think this would really help?
Yes, 100%. This will definitely help everybody to update their knowledge and keep in pace with the modern science. Definitely.
Yeah, over to you, Sriram. Many thanks, sir, for
Yeah.
being a part of this.
Thank you. Thank you.
yes. So we are just completed our session, and it's a time to finish the uh, webinar. Today's webinar of role of immunoglobulin on RPL and RIF. So thanks a lot. Thank you all the attendees for attending today's webinar, and majorly thanks to Dr. Prashant Deshmukh for such an informative session. So last but not least, during this pandemic situation, please take care of yourself as well as your family members also. Stay safe. Bye bye. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. That's a bundle.